Hello, Black Hat. I am so excited to be here today to talk about three important and interconnected issues: attribution, partnership, and the way we respond to incidents. So, first, a little bit about me. I'm Cynthia Kaiser. I'm a Deputy Assistant Director with FBI's Cyber Division, and I'm also an intelligence analyst by trade. And I can really tie my first entrance into working cyber matters to when I was a daily intelligence briefer to some of the most senior levels of the US government, where I was briefing the greatest threats facing our nation every day, and that includes spanning across all different sorts of threat categories. And that allowed me to be a part of some pivotal cyber incidents and see how the US government was positioning itself to be responding to global cyber threats. And that experience, it led me to realize that cybersecurity is truly the national security challenge of our lifetime, affecting every single one of our citizens, their jobs, and their way of life. And now as an executive in the Cyber Division, my passion for countering cyber threats has only grown, especially when I think about how every day I go to work and I'm protecting my friends, my family, and my community. Now, I'd love to say that I've always been proficient in cyber matters, but I distinctly remember one of my first interactions with technology. I was about 3 or 4, and my family was one of the first houses on the block to get one of those first generation IBM PCs, the ones that had the 2 different places for floppy disks, where you put one floppy disk in and you were going to run your application or program, and the second one was going to store data. Now I, not knowing what this mystery machine was for, proceeded to start putting coins in the slots, thinking this was a really expensive, nice piggy bank. So I guess looking back, you can say that I was one of the pioneers in digital currency. But thinking about that, obviously I got better. I learned what the proper function of those floppy disks were, and just how much easier would all of our jobs be if floppy disks were still the primary mechanism by which we were storing data. Instead, as we've had to keep up with learning about technological advancements for our own personal uses, we've also had to rapidly evolve how we're countering how our adversaries are looking to exploit that technology for malicious uses. In a world where everything's now saved and interconnected on the cloud, adversaries have more opportunities than ever to steal, disrupt, or even attack all of us and our way of life. So that's why in 2020, the FBI announced its cyber strategy focused on imposing risks and consequences on cyber adversaries, emphasizing partnerships, disruptions, and a shared responsibility to make it harder and more painful for hackers to succeed. What this really amounts to is removing threats from networks, taking down the key infrastructure and services that cyber adversaries are using to conduct their operations, and removing that cloak of anonymity that so many actors hide behind. Now, I think about that cloak of anonymity a lot, like I'm sure many of you do, not only because it's getting more technically difficult to gain attribution, but the decision-making process behind how and how much and what we do after attribution is becoming increasingly difficult as well. When I first started working cyber matters, the process for attribution felt more straightforward. We responded to an incident. While responding, we collected relevant data. After we collected that data, we analyzed technical artifacts, indicators of compromise, et cetera, and compared them with known adversary TTPs. And then we would decide how and how much detail to attribute publicly. But nowadays, these steps all feel more complex and like they're happening at the same time. So changes in technology, the global landscape, public expectations, network defense needs, and just the cyber criminal ecosystem itself has caused us to reevaluate how we are exactly doing established processes. It's complicated those established processes, given rise to some difficult questions, and made us rethink how can we most effectively approach evolving threats. And to me, those questions really come down to speed, specificity, and success. So speed, how fast should we make attribution, especially publicly? Specificity, how granular we can or are willing to be, and how should we potentially tie together enabling services, cybercriminal groups, proxies, and nation-state actors. And success, how can we develop operational options that have the greatest impact against adversaries? So as a member of the law enforcement community and intelligence community, the FBI stands at the center of that attribution process. Said another way, it's been our job for over 100 years to find the people intent on doing harm to others and bring them to justice. We often identify overlaps between criminal and national security cases that aren't always evident at the outset of investigations. But as robust as our efforts can be, we know we can't do this alone. That's why we're more reliant than ever on partners to help us navigate these new complexities. Partners in the private sector, partners in our own government, and partners across the world. Because cyber activity is not limited to the borders of one country. We absolutely cannot fight the constantly growing international enterprises of cyber criminal groups without the assistance and cooperation of our foreign partners, including many of you in this room. FBI Cyber Division very seriously takes fostering these relationships with our international counterparts. We have 16 and are poised to have 22 cyber assistant legal attaches in embassies around the world who are engaging constantly with our international partners on the majority of FBI cyber cases that have connections to either international actors, international victims, or international infrastructure. And it's in addition to those formal international positions, the FBI is just constantly engaging with our counterparts and deploying abroad. I think some of the most impactful actions that we take abroad have to do with the deployment of an FBI cyber action team, also known as a CAT team. In the last 24 months, we've deployed CAT teams over 8 times internationally, and our CAT teams have also been able to provide training to law enforcement agencies around the world. But going back to thinking about this increasing complexity around attribution, there are several examples from the last 2 years that really highlight how we're approaching these questions of speed, specificity, and success hand in hand with our international partners. So first, in mid-January 2022, immediately after we learned about the wiper malware attack known as Whispergate that was targeting Ukrainian government services, we engaged with our private sector counterparts, US government counterparts, to identify connections to known malicious actor, TTPs, and indicators of compromise. With 2 days of intense triage and analysis, we were able to tie that activity to Russia and made connections to previously attributed wiper attacks to Russia. And that success, though, it wasn't a 2-day success and that's it. It was built on years of efforts with the Ukrainians, countering some of the most destructive cyber effects that we've seen, including the 2015 black energy attacks against the Ukrainian energy sector and the 2017 NotPetya attacks that first targeted Ukraine before going worldwide. Now, our ability to make this quick initial attribution significantly strengthened partnerships and showed the value of broader information sharing on the eve of and at the start and during the hostilities in Ukraine. And this is a great example of when quick attribution that really just had country-level attribution or agency-level attribution was sufficient because we had a specific time period in which we wanted to help protect our private sector partners. The second example I want to walk through is really one of the best examples we have of how international partnerships have yielded incredible results. In July 2022, Albanian government was a victim of cyber attack that destroyed government data and shut down all Albanian online services. When Albanian officials requested US assistance, the FBI immediately responded, sending a CAT team and reassuring Albanian partners that they weren't in this alone. Because we were able to use our national security authorities, we were able to direct those CAT teams on the ground to review the most relevant technical information. But because we also used our law enforcement authorities, everything we collected was unclassified, so we were able to quickly and freely share that information. For several months, a rotating CAT presence was deployed within Albanian agencies, and through joint work with Albanian government partners and Microsoft teams on the ground, we were able to attribute those attacks to Iran. Then, with the Albanian government's permission, we went out and provided the FBI collected information to dozens of international partners, which led to a concurrent announcement by the US and 20 other partner nations, noting our support for the Albanian government, with many of them, including the US, identifying and attributing those attacks to Iran. Also, following that attack, we were able to put out a public advisory that provided all of these new technical details to net defenders to be able to also protect their networks. And I think we would have called it a success right there. But there was more. What speaks really powerfully to the work that was done in this instance is the geopolitical consequences that came out of it. The Albanian government closed the Iranian embassy and cut diplomatic ties with Iran. Consequences of that scale to cyber intrusions are rare, but they're important because they hold malicious actors accountable for disregarding the norms of peaceful state behavior in cyberspace. Now, the last example I want to share is also the biggest ever US government-led takedown of botnet infrastructure. And that was last August when we conducted a multinational operation to disrupt and dismantle QuackBot. Now, QuackBot victims ranged across industries, from financial institutions to medical device manufacturers and government agencies. And victims were infected through spam emails that contain a malicious link, which, when clicked, gave QuackBot the ability to deliver malware to affected computers. Pretty much any ransomware family that you can think of at one point had used QuackBot. The computers also became known as, but part of what's known as a botnet, where cybercriminals were able to control the devices remotely and carry out attacks at a larger scale against individuals and businesses worldwide. So we knew we had to do something. And we knew it wasn't going to be easy. QuackBot's infrastructure was globally distributed, and they were constantly changing their command and control infrastructure in an effort to evade detection. So this wasn't just a group of servers we were going to be able to take offline. We had to identify how the botnet operated and the technical information that enabled it to continue. And I'm not going to tell all our secrets, but with the help of 6 other countries, so France, Germany, Netherlands, Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, and the UK, on August 25th, the FBI gained lawful access to QuackBot's infrastructure and identified over 700,000 infected computers worldwide. The FBI then redirected QuackBot traffic to FBI-controlled servers that were able to instruct the infected computers to actually remove QuackBot malware. We also seized $9 million from the cybercriminals responsible for QuackBot, money which we've made available to victims of QuackBot today. And this is such a great example of that attribution decision-making process, and it's in a much different way than the prior 2 examples. For speed and specificity, we chose to go slow, and we wanted to be as specific as possible so we could build that successful disruption activity with our partners. Quick attribution here, it wouldn't have been as impactful. And in fact, I think this example shows really what the FBI Cyber Division does best for a couple of reasons. One, this operation truly targeted all aspects of this cyber criminal enterprise, hitting the adversary where it hurts the most. We were able to defeat the malware and delivery system, rendering it inoperable on victim computers, take control of the infrastructure, target adversary communications, and target their financial gains, restricting their access. And 2, it also shows how the FBI works as a team with our partners, leveraging our unique capabilities and authorities. There's no way we could have been as impactful without the multiple FBI field offices, US government agencies, and foreign partners. Bringing these examples together, each of them highlights different ways we approached working with international partners, different ways we collected information for attribution, different timelines to go public with that information, different amounts of specificity, and different ways we sought to successfully impose consequences and mitigate threats. But at their center, all of them had a need for attribution, a need to go public, and a need to identify impactful ways to make a difference against malicious cyber activity. Law enforcement actions are a key instrument as part of these impactful disruption and deterrence operations. And I think people would probably be surprised at how often we're able to put cyber criminals behind bars. But we know that law enforcement actions are most impactful when they're combined with other operations. You may even occasionally see us indict cyber criminals, even if we're not able to ultimately arrest them. We do that for a host of reasons. Driving a wedge between adversaries, hurting recruitment by taking private sector jobs off the table, limiting travel, and also just identifying where the acceptable lines of conduct in cyberspace are. We've learned to look for whatever option has the greatest impact. Like when we seize domain, money, infrastructure, we shut the back doors that adversaries have put onto networks to allow them to have access. Like we did in 2021, when we removed Chinese web shells from thousands of computers across the US in the operation known publicly as Hafnium. Now, if you're here today as a member of the private sector, you might be wondering, what can I do in an environment in which I find myself surrounded by all these nebulous cyber threats, or really just even in general, what does all this attribution talk have to do with what I do day in, day out? I think the question to all those, or the answer to all those questions are the same. The only way we can grapple with this complex, challenging environment is if we're willing to ask and look for answers to those difficult questions together. The choices we all make regarding attribution greatly influence vital policy decisions that guide our government's responses, and it's absolutely critical that international partners are on the same page about the threshold with which we're willing to jointly attribute cyber activity. And no matter if you're in the middle of a unique cyber incident on your networks, or a global campaign, or just a global event, every single day matters, and it's imperative that we maintain a two-way flow of information between private sector and governments. By proactively sharing substantive intelligence, we can work collaboratively to identify, deter, and disrupt cyber threats to industry, to our critical infrastructure, and also sharing all of the relevant technical information that helps us get to quick attribution. I implore all of you to ensure that your companies have an up-to-date and comprehensive incident response plan in place, and to practice it often so that you know who to call when an incident occurs. And I think ultimately, we're never going to know the full answers to some of these questions, and the questions are constantly going to be changing with different technological advances. But one thing we can always know, which is that the FBI and the rest of the US government want to be in lockstep with our international and private sector partners in every step of the way to make sure that we're able and willing and there to make important decisions together. Thank you.